All right, gang, welcome aboard once again. It's time for the weekly Mac Forum video chat. I'm your host, Sylvester Rock, back with you again this week. It's the November 26th edition, unless I've lost a day or so while on vacation here. We're back on Sunday night. As you know, last week I did the show on Monday. We're back on a regular Sunday schedule this week. Got quite a few forum-related things for you this week. I do want to remind you, once again, we've gone through, if you check the last broadcast, the November 20th edition, I have some things in there about how to update your profile. Won't go through that again. Particularly, you want to be sure that you keep your email address current with the forum. That makes it easy for us to send you the password reset request with some forum changes that have been made in the last several months. You have to update your password periodically, and if you don't do that, then when you get the warning, if we don't have a current email address, then we can't send you that reset request. So, and then you end up going through contact us. And that kind of just delays the whole process. So be sure that you send us, make sure that we have a current email address. You can go into your profile and change it if you need to. That was covered in our last forum broadcast. In fact, I think it was in the last two broadcasts. And if we need to, we can do that again. I'm thinking about maybe doing an upcoming show specifically for new members that covers things like how to post, some tips and tricks for maybe using the forum software a little more efficiently. And I'll definitely, if we do that one, I'll definitely cover the episode about how to use Google to search more effectively, because as some of our members have discovered, the forum's own search function really sometimes falls a little short. So if you can learn that little Google trick we've covered in a previous episode, I'll kind of link to that article if I can in the show notes. As usual, everything we talk about tonight will be in the show notes, and they'll be up shortly after the broadcast is over. Let's move right into things here for today. All right, first of all, this comes from member Vermahat. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Anytime I pronounce a user's name, if I do it incorrectly, please forgive me. Some of these names are kind of hard to make out. Now, this person is asking about the location for iTunes backups. In other words, where does iTunes save the backups for previous, anytime you've backed up iOS devices? I'm going to show you where to look for that. A couple of different ways of getting at it. First thing I'm going to do, this is one way to do it. I'm going to make sure that I'm in the Finder, as you can see there, and I'm going to pick, I'm going to do it this way. Now, right now, I've come up with my user folder open. That's just the way I have it set. But if you didn't, you can go to the Go menu, choose Library. From there, you're going to want to look at Application Support, and it's this folder right here, this Mobile Sync folder. And when you open that, you see another folder called Backups. Inside that Backups folder are several possible backups of iOS devices. Now, I really want to tell you, let me warn you about one thing. The other way to get into this is to go, and I'm going to show you that way too, because sometimes this is a little easier, but there's a limitation to it. I'm going to go to iTunes, and as you can see, I've already got it open. It's down in the dock. I'm going to go ahead and bring that up now. And I'm going to go to iTunes Preferences, so that you can see those. I'm going to click devices in that when the window comes up. Now, I can click on one of these. Now, notice these have dates. These are not repeated backups of the same devices. iTunes stores the most recent backup. So these are backups from different devices that I've had connected at one time or another. iTunes saves whatever is the most recent for that device. It's not going to go looking. If you can use these to restore a device, but let's say instead of your most recent, you want a backup from 2 weeks ago or a month ago. You just did a backup yesterday. You discover you need something from a backup that was done 2 weeks ago. iTunes is not going to find that because it's using the most current backup as your reference point for a restore. So to keep multiple backups around, your best bet is through using third-party software. There are a couple of different programs out there that will do that. If you ask in the forum, you can get some very good recommendations. The two that I am most familiar with are iMazing and iExplorer. But if you want to use multiple backups, iTunes and straight Mac backup is not going to be the way to go unless you're keeping a time machine backup going, and then you could find previous backups. All right, now next thing I want to talk about, another idea that came about in the forum, and some help here. A guy whose forum name is Guitar Geek. This is appropriate. He's asking a question about, as you would expect, probably from someone with a name like Guitar Geek. He's concerned about using GarageBand to monitor playback while he's practicing on guitar. And using some Bluetooth headset, he's getting some latency, which, as I'm sure you could guess real quickly, that kind of latency while you're trying to practice is not something that you want to experience. It really messes up the practice for you. Not being a musician, I've never experienced that. Haven't used GarageBand for that function, but I know enough about practicing to get that you really need to be able to hear it with as little latency as possible. And Patrick, aka PMR on the forum, has a list of some tips, tricks that you can find relative to trying to get the latency down in GarageBand. I'll be curious to know how well these tips work. I don't have a real effective way to test that. And there may be some other applications that would be more advantageous. I think GarageBand will work. I've read of other people using this kind of setup for GarageBand. So the question is, what are they doing to cut back on the latency? And these tips may certainly prove helpful. All right. Now, this is an interesting one. It's pretty basic, but it's not the kind of tip that I assume that everybody knows. Here's what happened. Flatlander57, once again, great username. It posted about removing an icon. Now, in the original post, they have removed the piece of software, moved it to the trash in preparation for deleting it. But the icon remains in the, what they said is in the taskbar or in the launch bar, okay, out of Launchpad. Now, I suspect that what they mean here is that the icon has stayed down here in the dock. The Windows equivalent of the taskbar. So I'm going to show you, let's assume you've moved a program to the trash and you want to move that icon out of the dock. Let me go ahead and show you how you would do that. I'm going to remove something that I can easily put back later. I'm going to remove Automator here. Now, as you can see, if I click and hold, I get a menu of choices that I can do. I don't want to do that. I'm going to single click, and I'm going to, it'll take a little practice to get this, single click and drag it up. And as you can see, as you drag it up out of the bar, it becomes almost invisible. And in some versions of the OS, as soon as you let go of the mouse, not only does it disappear, if you've got system animation turned on, it becomes a puff of smoke. That's how you take it out of the dock, okay? If I were to go to put it back, I'm simply going to navigate to the application menu, or application folder rather. I'm going to scroll down until I find that icon. Now, I've got two ways to do it. I can grab this icon and drag it back into the dock, just like you just saw me do. Or here's the other way to do it. Launch the application. And when you do that, all right, I'm going to just go ahead and close this little, I want to open this up again. I'm going to tell it that I'm going to open a project. Okay. I'm going to let it open this. But what I want to do is get this up and running. Because once it's running, all right, I'm going to build a new workflow here. Let's try workflow. I want to build a new workflow. And the only reason I'm going to do that now is now you can see this icon is back in the dock. When I click on it, one of my options is, right here in the options, is to keep it in the dock. And that's how I would put it back. Either of those two methods will put it back. There's a lot of different things that you can do with the dock. If you're a switcher and you recently switched to Mac, you're going to find that the dock in a great many ways is reminiscent of the taskbar in Windows. And just to give you some ideas, some things that you can do in the dock, I have a link to one of Apple's Mac Basic articles. It talks about the dock and how you can use it to hold applications, documents, how you can organize things, get them more to your liking, minimizing windows down to the dock. There are a number of things that you can do. And I want to real quickly show you how easy it can be to organize the dock. Now, I've got in my dock down here, Safari, as you can see, is here. I've also got Opera. And let's suppose that I wanted to put my two web browsers. These are the two browsers that I use most often. Let's say I wanted to put those side by side to make them easier to find. You can grab it and slide it, grab an icon, slide it to the position that you want. You can rearrange these in any particular order, except the one thing that you have to be careful of, particularly in older versions of the OS, only certain things. Right here next to the trash can, there's a little divider line. And if I want to move, as you can see right there, if I wanted to move folders, I have to put them in a certain place there, right near that divider line. And this Apple document explains all of that. It shows you how you can empty the trash from the dock, how you can eject items such as disk drives from the dock. So a very helpful document there. And the other place that documents can remain sometimes after you've deleted an application is in the Launchpad. Okay, Launchpad is this item right here that looks like a rocket. When I launch it, I see a bunch of the programs that are on my hard drive. I can move about, scrolling here and there. I can click on these to launch a program, but I can also delete things. Okay, as you can see, some of them are gathered in groups. When I go to delete something here, it's kind of tricky in the sense that some things will delete almost immediately. Apps that you have purchased through the App Store behave one way. Other programs have to be deleted in a very different way. So what I've done is, instead of walking you through that tonight, because one of the tips involves the terminal, and it's very easy for me to make a mistake. I'm not what you would call a fluent terminal guy. I'll link you to this article that talks about different types of LaunchBar programs and how you would go about deleting them if you wanted to do so. And that's going to give you a good idea of another way to launch a lot of programs. All right, and then the other note that I had here, I want to point this out. Let me go back to the top of this thread. McNamara 1 was mentioning some issues with Bluetooth. And for some reason, Bluetooth on the system had gotten disabled. So it was not recognizing a keyboard, and they could not input a password or anything of that nature. Now, a lot of the newer Macs ship with Bluetooth keyboards. And even my 2008 MacBook Pro can take a Bluetooth keyboard, has Bluetooth built in. So Bluetooth has been around the Mac for at least a decade. And here's the tip that I want to leave you with as far as Bluetooth is concerned. I've tried the Apple Bluetooth keyboard, and I've tried 2 or 3 different third-party Bluetooth keyboards. Some of them better than others. One of the things that I have discovered, particularly on older machines, is that sometimes if you have to use one of the modifier keys on boot up, let's say, for example, you're holding down the Option key during boot up, on some Bluetooth keyboards, especially on older systems, those key presses are not recognized. And that can be a big deal if you're troubleshooting. The other time that can be a big deal is when, if for some reason Bluetooth is not working right or has been turned off on your system. Now, when Bluetooth has been turned off, like my 2015 iMac rather, has a Bluetooth keyboard. If Bluetooth software suddenly goes haywire, I can't control the system very easily. It makes it really difficult to do things like enter keyboard, passwords rather, have the Mac recognize some of those key presses that we might want to use during boot up, such as Command R to get to the recovery partition, Command S to get to single user mode, and the like. So my tip for you is this. Even though the whole world wants to go Bluetooth and go wireless, and I've found Bluetooth for the most part on the Mac to be very, very reliable for me, even on older computers, I'm going to suggest to you that you keep around a wired Bluetooth keyboard for emergencies. Because if you get in a situation such as McNamara 1 was in, where for some reason Bluetooth is either off or non-functional, you can plug that keyboard and mouse, that Bluetooth keyboard and mouse, into your Mac, go ahead, boot the system, log in with your password, and start troubleshooting to see why you couldn't get in with a Bluetooth keyboard. That's also helpful. I ran into a situation today where I've got one of the Apple mice that has the charger built into the bottom of it, uses a lightning cable for charging. And I ran into a situation earlier today where I had not been paying attention to the little warning that says your batteries are running low. And all of a sudden my mouse went dead. Cursor just stopped moving. Everything else on the computer was functioning. I almost rebooted the system until I thought about the mouse. I figured out where the cursor was, realized it wasn't moving, and thought, oh wow, my mouse is dead. So I grabbed the trackpad, got it to recognize that, got that back up and functional. And so now I know it's not Bluetooth that's an issue. Plug the mouse into a charging cable and realize it had run down to nothing. So it's always good to have an alternate input device. And to me, having that alternate input device means, especially for troubleshooting purposes, have an old Bluetooth keyboard, an old USB keyboard around, have a USB mouse around. It doesn't have to be a fancy one. In fact, when it comes to the mice, the simpler the better, because these multifunction mice that have you loading third-party software can sometimes be the source of some of the problems that you're having. So just get yourself a simple 2 or 3 button Bluetooth mouse. USB mouse. I made that mistake a couple of times tonight. Beg your pardon. Get yourself a simple USB mouse. Doesn't have to be a Mac specific one. I've got an old mouse lying around that's been kicking around the house for a couple of years. I still pull it out every now and then. Same with the keyboard. The keyboard does not have to be a Mac keyboard. It can be one of those generic Windows type keyboards that you see at any discount store for a few bucks. The difference will be this: those keyboards are often not labeled with the equivalent keys on the Mac. So in other words, you won't usually see a keyboard, a marking on some of those where the Alt key is marked as Option, which is what it would be on the Mac, and the Windows key marked as Command. The Control key is usually the same, but it's not too terribly hard to figure out. And some of them, even some of the cheaper ones, are marked so that you can kind of figure out where they are. It never hurts, though, to have, as part of your troubleshooting toolkit, a current backup and an old school keyboard and mouse, just for the times when Bluetooth decides that it's not wanting to behave itself. You won't find that often unless you just forget and let your keyboard run down, which happens to the best of us. It's happened to me before. Fortunately, it happened late at night one night. I was shutting down for the day anyway, so all I did is plug the keyboard in overnight, let it charge, and by the next morning when I woke up, the keyboard was ready to go. But when you're troubleshooting, it's always good to eliminate a bad Bluetooth or wireless connection as part of the issue. And that has been true whether you're using an Apple keyboard or third-party keyboards. And I'm glad to say that with newer Macs, the Bluetooth is usually picked up a little bit faster in the boot sequence, and most of the time you can use a Bluetooth keyboard to activate those boot functions. But on an older Mac, you may be best off using a wired keyboard if you have to do things like boot from recovery mode. All right, guys, that's going to just about do it for this week's tips. I didn't put an iOS tip in this week. Excuse me for that. I probably have some stashed away somewhere. Every week I kind of run through the tips that I already have. I stumble on some on the internet and I add those. This week I didn't look at a lot of stuff. Coming up probably next week, I had planned to do it before now, but next week I think is going to be a good time for it. I'm going to talk a little bit about, since we're getting to the holiday season, where people are getting new Macs and getting rid of their old gear, we're going to talk about, it's going to be a twofold deal, clearing out an existing Mac or phone to get it ready to give to someone else. Maybe you're getting, you're getting a new one. Santa Claus has been good to you. You're getting that iPhone 10 or that new iMac Pro. And, if you don't want any of that stuff, just send it down my way. But I'm assuming you're going to want it. And you're going to probably want to pass your existing gear on to someone else, a charity, a relative, something of that nature. We'll talk about what you need to do to get ready for that, to get everything prepped and ready to go. Make sure you've got things under control. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about getting the new Mac set up, some things that you want to be sure that you do when you set up your new machine or your new phone. And then in 2 weeks from now, we'll probably talk about some issues for people who are switching from PC to Mac. If you're making that switch from Windows boxes to Mac OS, there are some things that you can do that will help you to get things going in the right direction. I'll have that coming up in a future show. Until then, that's going to just about do it for this week, guys. This is your host, Sylvester Rock, aka Sly Dude in the forum. Let me know during the week, post in the show thread if you have an idea of something you'd like to see us discuss, and I'll keep an eye out there. I'll be roaming through the forum from time to time, so as different questions get posted, they may become fodder for a future show. So keep an eye on things, see how things are going, and until next week, I'll see you in the forum, guys.